Welcome to today's episode of the Heaven and Elle podcast. I am your host, Elle Edwards, and I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. Today's episode is particularly for those times when either you're in a season where you're just like, none of this makes any sense. What is the point? Or when you find yourself reflecting back on your journey thus far and you think, that was a bit of a sidestep and that was a bit of a waste. None of those are actually true. That's ultimately the takeaway from today's episode. And I have some real tangible examples which kind of made me sat there go, no way, which I'll share in a moment. But the real reminder that I had via Holy Spirit that I want to share with you by way of encouragement is that nothing is wasted. And leaving aside the fact that everything that we go through in life, we can learn and we can grow and we can develop from that. At the same time, as I'm going to demonstrate in a minute, God has a habit of taking these pieces and then reusing them or redeeming them or taking them off in another direction, but it is still used for his purposes in a way that lights you up, works towards you being those things that you're excited about. All of it plays together and all of it makes a difference. So I hope by the end of today's episode you will be encouraged, because there's nothing worse really than to think that what you're doing is pointless or that you've wasted your time. Like, as some of you know, I turned 43 last week, which is very old if you ask my offspring. I know age is kind of like a relative thing. It depends on where you're standing, whether it's a big number or not. But it would be very easy to go, oh my word, I'm 43. And I feel like only now has God got to in this point where I'm like, I really know, like, finally how some of these pieces are playing together. There's this temptation, if we're not careful, to slip into comparison mode. We see people maybe who are younger than us, who in many ways you think, they're more successful, and if only I hadn't wasted time on this, then I'd be doing that. No. If ever you find yourself doing that, remember this episode and stop it. So I have 5 examples of things, phrases, stuff from my journey, some of which you've heard of before. Some of you, if you've been around a very long time, and tell me in the comments if the ones we get to in a moment, whether or not these are pieces that you've heard of, because if so, you and I have known each other a long time. But I'm going to share these by way of real life examples. So the first example is Youier itself. Youier.com. I first registered that back in 2014, which feels like a lifetime ago. It was 7 years ago. And I remember waiting on that domain name after reading, and the first time I came across that word Youier was in a book by John Ortberg, The Me I Want to Be. And he started to give me some of the language around this. And it was interesting because at the time, as a result of his book, he owned, or somebody part of his organisation owned Youier.com. And they did start to build out some stuff that would help you step into the fullness of who God made you to be. But then for reasons unbeknownst to me, they let it lapse. They did nothing with it. And I guess John focused on his books, which is great, and that's fine. It's interesting though, because one of the things that God's been really niggling me around is actually how important Youier is, and he's been expanding my understanding of it. And I was a bit like, well, yeah, but you gave it to John Ortberg, and he said, yeah, I did. And John Ortberg took it as far as he was able to, or was called to do, and now here's the baton and handing it over to you. But Youier is not a new thing. It was a piece that I picked up in 2014, played with a little bit. Some of you know that I then didn't do anything with it for a long, long time, but finally we're back. Another example is the Itchy Soul Playground. Itchy Soul started as a book. It's a work of fiction. I think it was back in about 2015, 2016, sometime around there. I was niggled to write this sort of non-fiction book about happiness. I was like, that's a bit boring. Well, I wonder if it could be a work of fiction instead. And so that's how the Itchy Soul, the novel, came to be. And it's interesting, so much of that does play into what we explore in the Itchy Soul Playground. Heaven and Elle, this podcast, the whole premise of it started as a website. I owned heavenandelle.com a long time ago. It wasn't my first ever site, but it was one of my first ever websites. It was a name that was given to me by a bloke on Twitter. So another example. Now here's an oldie for you. You're going to have to tell me if any of you remember the Should Shover challenge. It was a 21-day email-based challenge, which I wrote. That's not strictly true. I'm reminded It was a spoken piece, because I have somewhere in the depths of my Google Drive folder a transcription that a friend of mine took, and it was spoken, and then they typed it up for me, and so I still have that. And literally just this morning, God's been niggling me around this idea of a book, a Urea book, not just Urea goal setting, but a Urea book. And we started it. There's a book called Weird. Some of you might remember that. I had a cover for it. That's the starting point, or part of the starting point. And then Holy Spirit niggled me to go and look at the Should Shover Challenge content. And I was like, I was blown away by how much of that really does. Because what I really was looking for was, okay, the first part of Urea, the most important part, is the IER, the intentional expectant relationship piece. We start there. I'm assuming this will be a book. When the book is released, you're going to see we start with IER. We don't start with you, we start with relationship, intentional expectant relationship. Once we've done that, though, I was like, okay, Holy Spirit, but how does someone be themselves? What if they don't know what that looks like? And he nudged me towards the Should Shover Challenge. And I was just like, my goodness, it's like 12,000 words long. The content's there. I just need to tweak it a little bit. Blew me away. I don't even remember when I wrote that or recorded that. It was ages ago. And yet it's playing back into it. And the final one is the Dreamcatcher sessions, which is a one-on-one offering, which I kind of quietly went ta-da with a couple of days ago. It's fascinating to me. I've been on a journey with the idea of doing one-on-one coaching, and I'm not going to call it coaching because it's not really coaching even, but one-on-one work with folks. And then through a series of conversations with the Holy Spirit, he drew me back to about a decade ago and said, you know what, that thing you were doing a decade ago, that's needed now, but let's refine it. He's refined me and he's refined the process, so we're doing it with him. But it's another one that first came up 10 years ago. Now, the piece that he keeps niggling me around is, this has been true for me. And if it's true for me, it will be true for almost certainly for you. If not now, at some point in the future. Nothing is ever wasted. And it won't necessarily be names of things. I get compliments quite a lot on the different names for my products and books and services and whatever. I didn't name any of them, honestly. I already told you, Heaven and Hell bloke on Twitter gave it to me. Itchy Soul was as a result of a conversation. None of it was, I didn't come up with any of it. So for you, it might not be names of things specifically. It might be ideas. It might be things that you're playing with, whatever that looks like. But that reminder that nothing is ever wasted. And so if you're not really sure, if you're feeling frustrated, that invitation is to go and ask Holy Spirit and say to him, ask me, show me what this looks like from your perspective. Can you show me how this fits? Now, sometimes, frustratingly, the answer will be yes, but not yet. And we have to go, okay. And that's where the trust piece comes into. And that's why the IER, the intentional expectant relationship piece, that relationship piece is where we start. But sometimes you're going to go, can you show me how this fits? And he's going to go, well, I'm so glad you asked. And he will show you. And you'll be like, blown away. But nothing is ever wasted. All of it counts, makes a difference, can play into the vast, rich tapestry, the story that you are creating and living out day by day. And that's really exciting to me, because it means that every single day has a purpose. You stepping forward full to the top with God's love, in relationship with him, and just doing life. That's ultimately what it's about. And of course, in the Itchy Soul Playground, which I've already mentioned, we are doing this in community. There are resources there. So the you part of this, once you've got that intentional expectant relationship piece down, that you piece, who am I? What is God niggling me to do? How do I take action on these things? The Itchy Soul Playground is there to help you with that. urea.com/join is where you can find out more. But I'm really excited. And I hope this gives you some encouragement too. But I thank you for allowing me to share this with you. And I look forward to sharing with you again very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.